Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. So today we are not going to read a verse from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, but today we are going to discuss about the other Bhagavata, the devotee Bhagavata. He is also called as Bhagavata. He is non-different from the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So it's the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Obviously, we all know about Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He is an eminent personality in the Guru Parampara that we are so gloriously attached with in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So he is the father and also the Siksha Guru of the Guru of our Guru, of our Founder-Acharya Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada's Guru was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as we all know. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's father and also instructing spiritual master was none other than Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whose disappearance day is today. So we will take a few moments to chant his Pranati Mantra, and today we will discuss, instead of the Bhagavatam verse, today we will discuss the life of a Bhagavata who was just a few years ago amongst us. So you can repeat after me. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Rupanugavarayate. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Vaishnavis. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate. Translation, please repeat after me. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda, who is transcendental energy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is a strict follower of the Goswamis, headed by Srila Rupa Goswami. So we'll discuss a little bit about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and then today is also the disappearance day of Gadhadar Pandit. Gadhadar Pandit is one of the associates, personal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is part of the Panchatattva, like we see the deities in Mayapur. So Gadhadar Pandit is none other than Srimati Radharani. So we'll discuss a little bit about Gadhadar Pandit as well. But we'll first start with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So like the translation says over here, he is the transcendental energy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was invested with so much energy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so much Shakti. He had so much empowerment, so much blessings from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he achieved a lot of things when he was there on this planet. And not only achievement, but he himself was also a very great devotee of the in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And he gave birth to none other than the Lion Guru Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who then initiated our Founder-Acharya Srila Prabhupada. And we know how Srila Prabhupada has created a revolution in Krishna consciousness, spreading it all over the world. So that is the eminent position of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a very eminent Acharya in our Guru Parampara. And why his pastimes are so important to discuss for all of us, because most of us are Grahasthas. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is like the beacon. He shows us through his own example how it is possible to be a devotee, dedicate your life to Krishna Bhakti, to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preaching mission, at the same time managing his Grahasthashram very nicely. His family, he had quite a few children, but he was managing his Grahasthashram, his children and wife very nicely, while also doing his Krishna consciousness nicely. So that is why it's very important for Grahasthas in the Krishna consciousness movement, and everybody obviously, but especially it's very applicable for Grahasthas, because we have so much to learn from the life example of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because he himself was a Grahastha Acharya. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born in 1838, and he was born in a place called Bir Nagar in Ulagram in Nadia, and he was born in a very opulent family. So his birth name was Kedarnath Datta, and he was the seventh son of Raja Krishnananda Datta. So they were extremely wealthy when, during Bhaktivinoda Thakur's birth, his whole maternal family, his own family, father, mother, they were extremely wealthy. So he was born almost with a silver spoon in his mouth. So his father was a great devotee of Lord Nityananda, and later on Bhaktivinoda Thakur would be known as Daitya Kulera Prahalad. So he would be known as Prahalad in the family of non-devotees. Because generally Vaishnavism was not very well respected in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's family. But he was like the one person who emerged as a Vaishnava in his family, and therefore he was also called as Daitya Kulera Prahalad, the Prahalad amongst the family of non-devotees. So his childhood was mostly spent in the mansion of his maternal grandfather in Bir Nagar, in the same place. In Bir Nagar, his maternal grandfather used to live, and his elementary education, his primary schooling and all that was at the English school, which was set up by his own grandmother. So we can realize, how even in those days, he was born in 1838 and his grandmother has set up a school and she was the founder of that school. So we can understand what an aristocratic family and very cultured family Bhaktivinoda Thakur was coming from. Later on, he attended an English school in Krishnanagar. So he moved to Krishnanagar for some time, which was started by the king of Nadia. And he left that school. He left that school in Krishnanagar when his older brother died of cholera. So he left that school and he went away. And at a very young age, in 1849, when he was only 11 years old, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's father passed away. And when his father passed away, gradually the family fell into poverty. They were so opulent, but very slowly their wealth dwindled and they actually fell into poverty very soon. At the age of 12, now in those days, obviously there was early marriage that was happening. So at the age of 12, his mother arranged his marriage to the 5-year-old daughter of an acquaintance of his mother's. So at the age of 12, he got married, obviously. And because his father had passed away, his uncle took him under his fold. Now, his uncle was an eminent editor and publisher of like leading newspapers at that time. So his uncle took him under his fold, and he actually took him to Calcutta with him, because in Birnagar nobody was there, and he was in Krishnanagar, but he left that school because his brother also died of cholera, and then his father also soon passed away. So his uncle took him to Calcutta, and he homeschooled him there for some time. And even at that young age, he was only 12 years old at that time, he would help his uncle in actually selecting appropriate articles to publish in the newspapers. So he would select appropriate articles, he would sometimes sit and edit those articles, and he would help his uncle with the publishing of those articles in the newspaper that his uncle was the editor of. And later on, he started attending a Hindu charitable high school. Obviously, he entered high school when he was 13, 14 years old. So he attended that high school. And when he was approximately 18 or 19 years old, so this is in the year 1856-57, he entered college in Calcutta. So he was still in Calcutta. He had not gone back to his hometown of Birnagar. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, like we know how many books Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written, like even the Navadvip Dham Parikrama, Jaiva Dharma, like so many books Bhaktivinoda Thakur, eminent books Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written. And that flair for writing, he developed at a very young age. So at the age of 18 or 19 itself, when he was in the college in Calcutta, he started writing extensively, both in English and in Bengali language. Because from schooling, primary schooling, he had been taught in English, so his English was also very fluent. So he started writing extensively in both languages, and he was very, he loved English literature. So he was a very ardent follower of English literature. He studied it in depth, and he composed a 2-part English epic. Just at the age of 19, he composed that 2-part English epic, which was entitled The Poriad. And it was actually describing the life of Porus, who met Alexander the Great. So like some of us who are from India, I remember in my history, in school age, I had studied the life of Porus and Alexander the Great. So they were great, sort of Kshatriyas, warriors of their time. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a 2-part epic on the life of Porus called as Poriad. He was very attracted during that age. Now this is a Lila we have to understand. He was very attracted to Christian theology. And he would spend hours and hours and hours studying the writings and teachings of great Christian reformers. And he in fact also gave a very good lecture, a great lecture at the British Indian Society on the evolution of matter, because he had studied the life of Christian reformers, and in great depth he had studied Christian theology. So he actually gave a lecture in the British Indian Society on the evolution of matter. So his early adulthood, so in 1858, when he was just 20 years old, he actually returned to Nadia, to his hometown, because he wanted to connect back with his mother and his maternal grandmother and all that. But he realized when he came back that his whole hometown had been ruined and deserted, because there had been a pandemic. There was cholera at that time in his hometown, and it had almost deserted. People had left his hometown and gone away. And most of his relatives had died because of that pandemic of cholera that had happened in 1858. So he had only 2 surviving members in his family, his own mother and his maternal grandmother. So with both of them, he returned back to Calcutta. He realized there is nothing much left in Nadia, in Birnagar for him. So he returned back to Calcutta with his mother and his grandmother. And before his grandfather had passed away, his grandfather had given an instruction as a dying wish for Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which his grandmother conveyed to him, that he should visit all the holy places and take a pilgrimage and travel to Puri in Orissa. So just to fulfill his grandfather's wishes, he traveled extensively in Orissa and Jagannath Puri and visited all the monasteries and all the temples of Jagannath Puri. And also at that time, because he was already 20, 21 years old, he started considering the question of the means of his livelihood to support his grahasthashram, because obviously he was married. So till this time he was studying, but now he had finished his education, so he had to start thinking that how am I going to sustain my grahastha life? And he was not very attracted to the prospect of business, because when you do business, there is necessary dishonesty one has to do in business. And he did not want to do that. So he had those strong values in his life since his childhood. His maternal grandfather, his uncle, everybody had instilled those good values in him. So instead of taking up a business, he decided that he will actually become a school teacher. So he started his earning, like his livelihood, his career as a school teacher in the Medinipura High School. And later on, he became the headmaster of the same school. Like just, looking at his leadership qualities, his proficiency in English, his, expertise over the subject matters that he taught, he was later on promoted to become the headmaster of that school. At the age of 22, which is in 1860, his first son Achyutananda was born. But unfortunately, at the time of his son's birth, his wife died at childbirth. His wife could not sustain. She developed some complications and she passed away during the childbirth of their firstborn son itself. So later on, Bhaktivinoda Thakur married Bhagavati Devi. And this Bhagavati Devi was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life till he passed away. Like they were married for many, many years and they had many children through Bhagavati Devi. He published a book in English that described because he had visited all the monasteries and the temples in Orissa, Puri, and he had this flair for writing always. So he published a book which described all the ashrams and temples in the state of Orissa. And this became a very important turning point when he was writing this age of 22, when he was writing this book on all the temples and monasteries and all the pilgrimage sites of Orissa. During his post, that time he was the headmaster still, he started to look into various religious sects, philosophies and practices. He started studying them also in great detail. So at the age of 18, 19, we saw he was very attracted to Christian theology. He studied the life of Christian reformers in great detail. But later on at the age of 22, because he had traveled Puri and come, he wrote that book, he started looking at various Hindu religious philosophies, sects and practices that were in place during his time. And he came to understand that he saw that people were in general taking religion very cheaply. No one was taking it seriously. It was more like a show bottle thing that people were pursuing religion as, to show off their guru or to show off that, oh, I'm a religious person. But nobody was imbibing the true essence of religion. That is what he realized when he was reading in depth about different religious sects. He also came to know about the importance of the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He got exposed when he was studying various philosophies. He got exposed and he came to know about the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he could himself realize the importance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement and his philosophy, but he realized that it was not very well represented by people who were so-called followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because they said they were followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they were making an onslaught and they were actually polluting the pristine teachings and philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And that is what he discovered when he was actually doing the research on all these philosophies. So at the age of 23, obviously his pursuit was still going on to study different philosophies. He had become attracted to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy and movement. He accepted the post of deputy magistrate in Bengal, in the government. So he accepted a government service. From headmaster, he became a deputy magistrate. And later on, after seeing the corruption, because he joined government, he saw the corruption was very prevalent during that time. So he became the collectorate officer, because he wanted to set right the corruption that was there. He wanted to save the government's money. He did not want this moral decline in society. So he became the collectorate officer. And amidst all the continued work as so he was the deputy magistrate as well as the collectorate officer, he did not give up writing. That was one thing which he would always spare time for. Even though he was so busy, he continued writing extensively and composing various Bengali poems as well. Now, at the age of 30, approximately in 1868, when he was holding the highest position of magistrate in West Bengal. And that was the highest position which was held by an Indian, because it was British Raj at that time. We have to realize the Britishers would not allow Indians to have high positions, because they thought obviously they wanted to keep them under their rule. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, looking at his expertise, his skills in handling matters, the way he conducted himself when he was the collectorate, they actually made him the magistrate. And he obtained, during this time he obtained rare copies of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Somehow someone gifted those copies to him, and he obtained them through some sources of Vaishnavas. And he spent a lot of time studying the Chaitanya Charitamrita very deeply. And his own faith, again, he is an eternal associate of the Lord, but in earthly Lila, it is described that during this phase, when he actually obtained these rare copies and he studied them deeply, his own faith intensified in the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was absorbed in studying this book very nicely. In day and night, he used to study. And he incessantly began submitting heartfelt prayers at the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he started begging for his mercy. And at this stage of his life, he realized also that yes, Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Lord Chaitanya is none other than Lord Krishna, who came to spread the holy names of Lord Krishna. So that is the realization he got during this phase of his life, when he was studying the Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita very deeply. And he soon published a very beautiful song on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, on his life, saying Satchidananda Prema Alankara. So Satchidananda Prema Alankara, that is the poem he published. Now, at the age of 31, he delivered a speech on Śrīmad Bhāgavatam to a large congregation of prominent men from India. They had all assembled, and there were some people who had even come from England. And he gave a very nice speech on Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So at this stage, he was also transferred to a place called Champaran in India. So he was in the magistrate of Bengal, and then he was transferred to Champaran. And over there, his second son was born, whose name was Radhika Prasad. And here people used to worship, like we've heard about the famous pastime of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, about how he delivered a ghost from a tree. So this happened in Champaran. When he was posted in Champaran, he saw that the villagers in Champaran used to worship a ghost in a banyan tree. Banyan tree, they used to worship a ghost. This ghost had the power to influence the local judge in the favor of the worshipper. So can you imagine? People used to go to worship this tree because that ghost was there inside this tree, and this ghost could influence the mind of the judge. And influence the mind of the judge to give a judgment in the favor of the worshipper. So you can imagine which type of people must be going and worshipping. Obviously, it must be criminals and all who are going and worshipping, because they wanted a judgment in their favor from the judge. So he realized all these hodgepodge practices were going on. So he advised, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, from the beginning, he was a reformer. He did not like as soon as he saw corruption, he wanted to reform that practice. As soon as he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement was being taken very cheaply and it was not being represented and it was being polluted by so-called followers, he wanted to reform. So he studied himself the Chaitanya Charitamrita deeply. He started composing songs on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life. And over here, when he saw this practice going on of worshipping ghosts in banyan trees, that too just to influence the mind of a judge, he actually advised a local scholar, to recite the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam under the tree continuously day and night. So every day and night that scholar would sit under that tree and he would continuously chant the verses of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. After 1 month of this continuous chanting of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, recitation of Bhāgavatam, the tree actually crashed to the ground. And the ghost got liberation from that tree. So it crashed to the ground and the ghost went away, because the ghost heard Śrīmad Bhāgavatam for such a long time, for 1 month. So he got liberation. And when people saw this happening, their faith was renewed in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and their faith was renewed in Krishna consciousness, in Krishna Bhakti. Because they saw the power of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and they saw what effect it had on the ghost and what effect it had on the tree. And that time Bhaktivinoda Thakur also became very prominent in terms of trying to reform all these hodgepodge practices which are there. And once this pastime was done in Champaran, he was very happily moved to the holy place of Jagannath Puri, where he continued being the magistrate. By this time, he was approximately 35 years old. So this was the year 1873. Now, when he was posted in Jagannath Puri, near the capital of Orissa, there was a mystic. Again, we have heard and we have also seen this pastime in Prabhupada's own biography, Abhay Charan. So there was a mystic by the name of Bishak Sen, who used to live in a place near Orissa when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was posted over there. And this Bishak Sen had 2 followers called as Brahma and Shiva. and he himself used to claim that he is Vishnu. And he had very high mystic powers. Obviously, he was an accomplished mystic yogi. So he could actually produce fire from his hair. He had such high mystic powers. He could do many miracles for people. And because of this, there were a lot of people, innocent people, who were getting attracted to him. Because he could show all these miracles, and people were, falling in for his cheap mystic presentations that he was doing, the siddhis that he was showing. And people were falling in for him, and people were thinking, oh, he's a worshipable person, we should go and worship him. And he was claiming that he is also Vishnu, while his two followers were Brahma and Shiva. So when Bhaktivinoda Thakur came to know about this, in fact, it is said that he also claimed that he will actually drive the British rule people away, and he would himself become the king. So obviously when the British people heard about this, they wanted to take some action, and they issued orders for his arrest. But people were so scared, even the local policemen and everyone was so scared, and even the judge at that time was so scared that they were very afraid to go and actually arrest him and to implement that order which the Britishers had said, because they knew he had mystic siddhis, and they knew he could actually harm them if they did like that. So then the minister, the main person, the chief of that Orissa, he actually approached Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Knowing how much Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a reformer, how Bhaktivinoda Thakur would not lying low, take all these practices, malpractices, which go on in the society. So he approached Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he requested him, can you do something about this? Because this person is, first of all, spreading malpractices. People are getting attracted to his mystic siddhis, and he's taking people away from the real pursuit of religion. But at the same time, he's also claiming that he will drive the Britishers out, and he's sort of creating like a revolution, which the Britishers are not happy about. So can you do something about it? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was very fearless. So the orders had already been issued for his arrest. So he actually first went for peace negotiations with Bishak Sen. He went to his ashram and he requested Bishak Sen. He said, why don't you come to Puri with me, and why don't you take darshan of Lord Jagannath and take his blessings? He is Vishnu. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why do you spread all these cheating religious practices in the society? Why do you claim yourself to be Vishnu and your followers to be Brahma and Shiva? There the Supreme Lord Krishna or Vishnu is sitting as Lord Jagannath in Puri. Just come and take his blessings, everything will be okay. So at that time he retorted. He became very angry. Bishak Sen became angry, and he retorted, why should I come and take blessings of Jagannath? He is only a hunk of wood, whereas I am the Supreme Person. And when Bhaktivinoda Thakur heard this, he became furious. Because by that time, obviously, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, like we said, for him, he had realized Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he could not hear this blasphemy of Krishna and of Lord Jagannath, especially calling him as an ordinary hunk of wood. So he became very furious, and he arrested the rogue. And he brought him to Puri and threw him in jail over there. And he kept 100 people to guard him, because everyone was so scared. So 1 or 2 people were scared to stand outside his prison cell and guard him. So he said, don't worry, we'll have 100 people who will guard this particular prisoner. And he began a trial. Obviously, he was the magistrate. So he began a trial, and the trial lasted for 18 days. And thousands of followers, because Bishak Sen was very popular. He had thousands of followers by that time. And thousands of followers used to do morcha. We know morcha, no? Outside the police station. They would all stand outside and shout slogans. Release Bishak Sen, release Bishak Sen, like that. And Bishak Sen himself used to keep threatening Bhaktivinoda Thakur that you don't know what powers I have. I will ensure that you and your whole family dies. Just because of my mystic powers, you made a grave mistake of arresting me and putting me in prison. And that time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's daughter was there, whose name was Kadambini. She became suddenly very ill, very seriously ill, and she was on the verge of death. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur realized that this is the doing of none other than Bishak Sen, his mystic powers. And he said, yet let all of us die, but this rascal must be punished, because he is actually taking people away from the real goal of life. He's claiming himself to be God, and he's cheating everybody in the name of religion. So this rascal should be punished, and he should be definitely put to death, and it's okay if all of us die in that process. So he was not afraid at all. Even though Bhagavati Devi had become a little scared, because obviously her daughter was so seriously ill. And on the last day of the judgment, Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself became seriously ill. He also developed very high fever, similar to what his daughter was undergoing. And he again realized that this is the doing of none other than Bishak-Sen. But still very fearlessly, he went to the court and he ruled that this fellow is, like he ruled against him, and he said this fellow should be punished. And he actually sentenced him to jail for many, many months. For 18 months, and for political conspiracy, obviously against the Britishers, because he said I'll overthrow them, and also because of religious, cheating religious propaganda. So when Bishak-Sen was being readied for jail, the district medical officer, because someone told Bhaktivinoda Thakur and that district medical officer that all the powers of Bishak-Sen are in his hair. You know how mystic yogis, they conserve their power in some place in their body. So with Bishak-Sen, he had conserved all his powers in his hair. And when this was informed, Bhaktivinoda Thakur told the district medical officer, just cut off his hair. Because he's been sentenced to jail, and in jail, obviously, you can't have, he had really big, big bush of hair on his head. So he said, just cut off all his hair and then throw him into jail. So as soon as his head was shaved off and they cut off all his hair, he immediately fell down to the ground like a dead man and lost all his powers immediately, all his mystic powers. And in fact, he had to be transferred to jail on a stretcher. He could not even stand up and walk. That whole, great mystic yogi who used to show so many miracles had to be ultimately carried on a stretcher because he could not walk himself to the jail. And it is said that after 3 months, he was moved to the central jail at Medinapur, and over there he consumed poison and died. So this is how Bhaktivinoda Thakur dealt with Bishak-Sen. He was he was like a thunderbolt when it came to cutting down any malpractices that were there, and also reforming the society, because he wanted everyone to realize that this is a cheating person whom you all are blindly following, just getting attracted by all his mystic opulences. So that is the reformation Bhaktivinoda Thakur was able to bring in terms of this Bishak-Sen personality. Now, by around the age 1874 to 1893, between the age of 38 to 55, Bhaktivinoda Thakur spent much of his time in seclusion. He used to chant the holy names of Lord Krishna. Incessantly he started chanting. And he also executed worldly duties at the same time. So he started going in seclusion. He was not associating much with the outside world. All his spare time, he would just sit and keep chanting the holy names of Krishna. And at the same time, obviously, he was still doing the duties of magistrate. So he executed his worldly duties, but at the same time, he was absorbed in Krishna holy names. He wrote several books in Sanskrit during this time. So he was around 36 years old, including Sri Krishna Samhita, Tattva Sutram, and Tattva Viveka. And plus in Bengali, he also wrote his famous journal called Kalyana Kalpataru. So he was continuously, like we saw, he was continuously writing during that time as well. And he was appointed soon the manager of the Jagannath Puri temple. While he was the magistrate also of Orissa, he was appointed the manager also. And he brought lots of reformations and regulation in the worship that was happening in Jagannath Puri when he became the manager. In 1874, when he was living in Jagannath Puri, in a house near Jagannath Vallabha garden, his most illustrious 4th son was born, answering the prayer of the Lord. So he had prayed to the Lord that, oh my Lord, let a ray of Vishnu come to this world, who will then help in transforming the society which is completely lost their God consciousness. So he had prayed this, and in 1874, the most illustrious child, the guru of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, was born at that time. And it is said that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was only 6 months old, that time his mother, the Jagannath Puri Rath Yatra had happened. And the Rath cart somehow came and stopped in front of their house. You know, that mutt is still there. We can still visit that mutt on Grant Road where where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was there in his childhood. So the Rath cart somehow came and stopped over there, and his mother, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mother, Bhagavati Devi, took advantage of this opportunity and she took him to take the darshan of Lord Jagannath. And she actually placed her child at the lotus feet of Jagannath because the cart had stopped. It was not moving at all. So she climbed up the cart and she placed the child at the lotus feet. And at that time it is said a flower fell on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he got that blessings. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur got that affirmation from Lord Jagannath that definitely Jagannath has answered his prayers that, oh my Lord, please send a ray of Vishnu who will help in transforming and spreading Krishna consciousness further in this world. So he named him Bimal Prasad. After there is a Devi in the Jagannath Puri temple courtyard whose name is Bimla Devi. So he actually thought that this Bimla Devi has given him this prasad in the form of a son, and therefore he named his child as Bimal Prasad, who later on came to be known as the famous Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Now around this time he also, later on after his son was born, he also took formal Diksha at that time. So he was around 36, 37 years old, and he took formal Diksha initiation from Vipin Bihari Goswami, who had descended in the line of Janava Mata. So that was the initiating spiritual master of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Vipin Bihari Goswami. Now at the age of 43, he began publishing the Sajjana Toshni. He started publishing many editions. He started distributing and circulating it all over India. And he also desired to see the land of Vraja. So he spent 3 months in Vrindavan. He visited Vrindavan from Jagannath Puri, and he spent 3 months over there. And that time he met none other than Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. And Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj would spend 6 months in Vrindavan and 6 months in Navadvip. Like that he would move. So when Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was in Vrindavan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur met him there. When he also stayed there for 3 months. And he immediately was so attracted to Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj that he accepted him as his eternal instructing spiritual master, as his Siksha Guru. And that is why we see Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj's photo beyond Bhaktivinoda Thakur. On the altar also we have that lineage which is like that. So that is because he was taking more instructions from Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, and that Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj had a more prominent position in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life. And that is how Srila Prabhupada kept the Guru Parampara on every ISKCON temple. So in the year 1887, when he was 49 years old, he actually resolved to quit government service. He had become tired. He had been serving government service, like he had been in government service for quite a long time, and he just wanted to go to Vrindavan and just do Krishna Bhakti. He wanted to give up all his material engagements, worldly assignments that he had and projects that he was doing. He wanted to give up everything, give up his job and just go and settle in Vrindavan. And while he was contemplating like that, one night, while he was still in the government service, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the dream of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he instructed Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He told him, you will certainly go to Vrindavan, but first there is a service which I want you to perform in Navadvip. Therefore, you please go to Navadvip, to my birthplace, and I want you to perform some service. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur took this instruction which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave in his dream to his heart, and he actually secured. He said, no, now I should not live in Jagannath Puri. I should go to Navadvip since my Lord has asked me to do so. So he secured a transfer to Krishnanagar. And while he was staying in Rani Dharmashala in Navadvip, he was sitting on the roof and chanting. And Bimal Prasad, young Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was also next to him and chanting with his father. And at that time, on the other side of the Ganga, he spotted a tal tree next to a building that gave off a remarkable effulgence. So when he saw this sitting on this side of the Ganga, he was wondering. And this happened for quite some time. That every night he would see this effulgence coming out from the tal tree, and there was a house near there from where he would see the effulgence coming out. So he went to he realized that there is some indication in this. So he went to the Krishnanagar library and he studied the old manuscripts of Chaitanya Bhagavat and also Navadvip Dham Parikrama. He had some old manuscripts which he studied. And he also studied some old maps of Nadia. And he realized that, the Ganga had changed its course actually, and what, was being presently called Mayapur was actually not present Mayapur. It was not the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because the river Ganga had changed its course during the the 500 years that had passed. So he then, after studying the manuscripts, after studying the map in detail, he also went to that village. And he inquired from the local villagers and the elderly people in that village. And he uncovered facts about modern-day Navadvip. And he realized how that was not actually the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he discovered eventually that the place that he had seen from the rooftop of Rani Dharmashala was actually the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that was his contribution to the Vaishnava society. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used him as an instrument to discover the true birthplace and the glories of his birthplace, because otherwise people had actually assumed some other, because like we said, the Ganga had changed course, Navadvip and Mayapur was assumed to be somewhere else. But when Bhaktivinoda Thakur went and inquired with the elderly villagers, it got further affirmed that no, this actually, the light where he had seen coming from, that is actually the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That was actually Yogapeeth. Not only did he do that, he also invited Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, who was actually the head of Gaudiya Vaishnavas at that time. And we know that pastime. Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was at a very advanced stage. He was almost 120 years old by that time. He was not even able to walk. So his servant had to carry him in his basket because he was not able to walk. But he invited Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj because obviously Guru Sadhu Shastra, he wanted to check with him once before confirming that yes, he had referred to the Shastras, he had referred to all these elderly people who also gave him some suggestions on where the holy place could be. But he wanted to confirm this with Bhakta Shiromani Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. So when Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj arrived at that place on the, in the basket on the head of his servant, he immediately started getting ecstatic symptoms. And he said he couldn't walk. In fact, his eyes were also drooping and somebody had to open his eyes like that physically. So in that state, he still jumped out of the basket and he started dancing in ecstasy. And he started chanting Jai Sachinandan loudly. And this gave further confirmation, like his, the idea that he had developed in his mind got completely confirmed now, that yes, this is definitely the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually started, that whole project of setting up the temple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he wanted everybody to participate in the construction of the temple at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace. So he started, what Prabhupada also following in its footsteps started life membership. That is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur was doing at that time. He started going house to house and he started collecting donations from them. And he would tell them, even if you give 1 rupee, that's fine, but donate towards this noble cause of constructing a temple in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace. Because then all of you will get that pious, credits. All of you will get that Agyata Sukriti of giving for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthday. So like that, he made everybody participate and he helped in the construction of the temple and establishing that, yes, this is the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which all of us now visit. Like so many Vaishnavas and pilgrims now go to visit the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But that became manifested only because of the mercy of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. In the same year, he also, after he established that, he also soon published the Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, which is still in circulation. We can read his book even now to understand the glories of Navadvip Dham. So later on, because obviously he had so much respect for Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, who was his eternal Siksha Guru, he renovated the house at a place called Ravas Ghat for Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj to stay peacefully and do his bhajan. And he also took leave from his office. He was still the magistrate at that time. He took leave from his office for 2 years. He secured a plot of land. He wanted to have a house in Navadvip. That was his desire. So he secured a plot of land in Godrumadvip. And he constructed a kutir, like an ashram for himself to stay, which is known as the Surabhi Kunj, Swananda Surabhi Kunj. So all of us, obviously, many of us have visited that. We can see Bhaktivinoda Thakur's room. Like, I don't know now if they are still allowing, but many years ago, they used to allow us to go up. There was this very narrow staircase, and there was a very dark room without any windows. And in that dark room, Bhaktivinoda Thakur would put like a, chaddar over his head, and there he would sit and chant his rounds. So that was his room for just chanting, for his absorption in Krishna's holy names. And that was done by him in the year, then he was approximately 49 or 50 years old. So these are some of the glories of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Now Bhaktivinoda Thakur made 3 predictions. Very, very important 3 predictions he made. The first prediction he made was that a personality will very soon appear. He has written in his books, and he will travel all over the world to spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So what we see Srila Prabhupada achieved and established, that was predicted by Bhaktivinoda Thakur during his lifetime itself. That a personality will appear who will travel all over the world and will spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Very soon, so that was the first prediction. The second prediction was, very soon the chanting of Harinam Sankirtan will be spread all over the world. People from America, England, France, Germany, Russia will take up kartals and mridanga, and they will all chant Hare Krishna in their own towns. Now don't we see that happening? We see Prabhupada, in fact, we see it is being said for Prabhupada that he created a home, a roof under which every community and nationality could live. So we see in our own temple, we have devotees from so many parts of the world, and especially when we go to like holy places like Vrindavan, Puri and Mayapur, we see devotees from all parts of the world. And every place, almost every major city in the world, Prabhupada has established temples, and his disciples are still opening temples in every major city in the world. And that was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's second prediction. The third prediction of Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, fair-skinned foreigners will come to Sri Mayapur Dham and join with the Bengali Vaishnavas to chant Jai Sachinandan, Jai Sachinandan. So that was his third prediction. And we see that. Now, if we go to Mayapur, like we have a whole Russian village almost over there. And so many people from different communities. So that was, he predicted fair-skinned people along with Bengali Vaishnavas will glorify Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his own birthplace of Mayapur Dham. So these were all his predictions. Now Srila Prabhupada, there was a very nice pastime which had happened during Srila Prabhupada time. So the land had been acquired. Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish a temple in Mayapur. And the land had been acquired already. And at that time, Prabhupada, we know the struggle with which Tamal Krishna Maharaj had to acquire the land in Mayapur Dham. So they acquired the land, but there was flooding. The Ganga used to flood the land, and the land was completely flooded. And at that time, Prabhupada started contemplating that we have bought this huge piece of land with so much effort that we acquired this, but it keeps getting flooded. So maybe we should build, and devotees were also discussing with Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was saying, maybe we should build a temple in Birnagar, the birthplace of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So that is the importance which Prabhupada was giving to the birthplace of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That much, Prabhupada considered Bhaktivinoda Thakur as one of the eminent acharyas of our Guru Parampara. So he said, maybe we should build a temple over there. But later on, Srila Prabhupada reconciled, and he again gave instructions to his followers that, okay, we'll build a temple in Mayapur Dham only. And Prabhupada declared to his disciples at that time, if you build this temple in Mayapur Dham, Bhaktivinoda Thakur will personally come to take you all back to Godhead. That is the blessing which Srila Prabhupada gave, and the declaration which Srila Prabhupada did to his disciples. Because everybody was struggling a lot when they were building the temple in Mayapur, because it was, there were rice paddy fields, there was mosquito infestation, so many rats. Disciples, they were all obviously Western disciples who were not used to these hardships. So they would continuously fall sick, the Ganga would flood the land sometimes. So they were going through a lot of hardships in trying to build that temple. And obviously, the dacoits would sometimes come and threaten them and all that. So that time, Srila Prabhupada, to inspire them, he told that once you build this, or if you build this temple, Bhaktivinoda Thakur will personally come to take you back. Because it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's dream that everybody, like people from all, nationalities come and chant in this holy place of Mayapur, along with the Bengali Vaishnavas chanting Jai Sachinandan. So in 1914, on June 23rd, just before noon, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in Jagannath Puri at that time. He disappeared from this world, coinciding with the disappearance day of Srila Gadhadar Pandit. So he disappeared in Jagannath Puri, and his disciples, they knew how much he was attached to Navadvip Dham. They actually carried his remains to Godruma Dweep, and they actually immersed his remains over there in Godruma Dweep, in Navadvip Dham. And, amidst youth Sankirtan, they took him there. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur's eternal position is that he is Kamala Manjari in Krishna Lila. He is assisting Rupa Goswami, who is Rupa Manjari, in then, worshipping Srimati Radharani and arranging for the pastimes of the divine couple Sri Radha and Krishna. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki. So we will now, the next few minutes we will spend on discussing about Gadhadar Pandit, who is part of the Panchatattva. He is none other than Srimati Radharani. So in the Gaura Ganodesh Deepika, verse 147 to 153, it is stated about Gadhadar Pandit that the pleasure potency of Sri Krishna, formerly known as Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani, is now personified in the form of Sri Gadhadar Pandit in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we have recently started studying, like a few months ago, we've started studying the Bhakti Sarvabhauma course under His Grace Keshav Prabhu. And that is an in-depth study of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's so nectarian just to study. We are in the initial chapters of the Adi Lila, but it's so nectarian to study the internal reasons and the external reasons of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. And it is described over that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to actually taste the love which Srimati Radharani alone was relishing, looking at the sweetness and experiencing the sweetness of Sri Krishna. That is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like one of the internal reasons was he wanted to taste that love which she experienced, and that was exclusively Radharani's domain, to experience that highest bhav, that mahabhav which she felt when she saw the sweetness of Sri Krishna. So he assumed the bhav of Radharani and he came into this material world as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Gadhadar Pandit, so whatever was remaining of that bhav of Radharani, she appeared as Gadhadar Pandit to assist Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his pastimes. So he was born in Navadvip Dham and his parents' name were Madhava Mishra and Ratnavati. And they were natives of Chattagram district, but later on they had moved to Navadvip. And it is said that Ratnavati Devi was very good friend of Sachi Mata. So they had also become very good friends, and Gadhadar Pandit and Nimai Pandit were also childhood friends, like they were inseparable. Whenever, wherever they could not live without each other, they would continuously play with each other, even go to school together. So all the activities Nimai Pandit and Gadhadar Pandit used to do together. So in early childhood, Gadhadar Pandit's qualities were, since childhood he was very serene, very patient, very calm, and very fond of solitude and very renounced since childhood. Gadhadar Pandit was like that. And in that sense, he was quite contrary to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the personality he was displaying as Nimai Pandit. So Nimai Pandit was quite precocious. He was very naughty. He would actually challenge people. He would continuously have arguments with people about grammar, logic, or any matter. But his nature was quite opposite. And Gadhadar Pandit was very peaceful, calm, very detached. He liked solitude. So their natures used to contrast like that sometimes. And because of that, he was not very fond of these childhood, display of behavior of Nimai Pandit. And he would sometimes stay away from Nimai Pandit because of, whenever he used to display that behavior. So whenever they used to go to school, Nimai would sometimes catch hold of Gadhadar Pandit's hand and he would chastise him. He would say, "What do you think of yourself? You think you are a really great Pandit? Tell me, what are the symptoms of a liberated soul?" So Nimai Pandit, as a great grammar Pandit and a logician, he would continuously keep, challenging everyone and keep drawing them into debates with him. So Gadhadar Pandit would scripturally explain. Whenever Nimai Pandit would ask him such questions, he would very nicely scripturally explain everything to him. Yet Nimai would tell that this is the absolutely wrong answer. So he would always argue back with all these people. And he said that the display of acute misery and suffering is actually the symptom of a truly liberated soul. That is how he would again, rebuke whatever Gadhadar Pandit was saying. Gadhadar Pandit tried to argue further on that point, again quoting Shastras and scriptures. But with a wave of his hand, Nimai would dismiss all the logic and told him that Gadhadar would understand his answer later on when he got home. So this is how they used to keep having these arguments, Gadhadar Pandit and Nimai Pandit. And Gadhadar Pandit, like we said, he was not very attracted to this particular pastime, the behavior, childhood behavior of Nimai Pandit. So he would keep his distance, but sometimes he would wonder that why Advaita-acharya looked at Nimai with such intense faith and devotion. That is what Gadhadar Pandit used to wonder. And even Ishwarapuri, he also seemed to be very respectful of Nimai Pandit. And he used to wonder, he's such an argumentative child. He keeps doing debates with everybody. He keeps, catching people unwillingly against their will. He will keep drawing them into arguments. And why are Advaita-acharya and Ishwarapuri looking at him with so much faith? So he used to sometimes be mystified by that behavior of theirs. He said undoubtedly he used to think, yes, Nimai Pandit is a very clever child and intelligent, but it seemed that Advaita-acharya saw something in Nimai Pandit which Gadhadar Pandit was not able to fathom at that time. So once while Gadhadar Pandit was plucking flowers, many years later, he was plucking flowers at the house of Śrīmad Pandit, because there were very few Vaishnavas at that time in Navadvip, and they would all try to be in the association of each other, because the rest of Navadvip was just steeped into grammar, logic, becoming Pandits and dry philosophical arguments and scholarship and all that. So these devotees who used to associate with each other very intimately. And once Gadhadar Pandit was plucking flowers in Srivas Thakur's house. Srivas came up with a basket of flowers, and beaming with joy, he announced to all the Vaishnavas who were present there. He said, Nimai has just returned from Gaya yesterday. And unbelievable, but his cheekiness and his arrogance has disappeared completely. And now he is a very compassionate, humble and meek person. Continuously he is shedding tears, and he writhes in agony and cries out piteously, Krishna, Krishna. He does not even look at like a normal human being anymore, but he somehow looks like someone from another realm, as if he has descended from somewhere. This is the sudden transformation which has happened in Nimai Pandit. Gone are those days when he used to argue with everybody. He's all the time crying in separation of Lord Krishna, and all the times trying to chant his holy names. And Nimai Pandit has called, he gave the message, Srivas Thakur gave the message to all the Vaishnavas that Nimai Pandit has called all of us to assemble at the house of Shuklambar Brahmachari, and he may share the reason of his transformation and what pain he is going through with all of us. So Gadhadar Pandit instinctively exclaimed that though I have not been invited to this gathering, I will also go to know the reason behind this incredible transformation of Nimai Pandit. So he also went, but he hid himself in the inner house of Shuklambar Brahmachari, and outside Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was talking to all the Vaishnavas very intimately. So he saw the beautiful golden effulgent form of Nimai, which stood in the middle of the courtyard of Shuklambar Brahmachari, and his large lotus eyes-like eyes. And losing control of himself, because Nimai was continuously crying in separation of Lord Krishna, he lost control of himself, and he burst into tears and started sobbing loudly. And Nimai Pandit was, continuously saying, where is Lord Krishna? Where is Lord Krishna? He was continuously reciting like that. He was here just now, but where has he disappeared? And where has he hidden himself from me now? So these were the heartfelt prayers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the courtyard. And everybody was stunned. And while crying like this, Nimai fell unconscious on the ground. And later on, the devotees with great difficulty revived him. And when they revived him, he could hear someone sobbing very incessantly inside. Loudly somebody's cries he could hear. So he actually asked the devotees that, who is this crying inside so loudly? Why is he not present here in the courtyard? And that time the devotee said that, oh, it is none other than your own Gadhadar who is crying inside so piteously. So he said, bring him here in front of me. And when he was brought over there, they embraced each other, and they had like a reunion in his new form, because Nimai Pandit had completely transformed. So from childhood, like we know, Gadhadar Pandit was somehow very attracted. He would try to keep away because of that behavior of Nimai Pandit, but he was always attracted to Nimai Pandit, and he could not be away from Nimai Pandit's association for long. So Nimai called Gadhadar and told him, since early childhood, you always were devoted to Lord Krishna. But I wasted my time in false pursuits and achieved nothing. At one time, I too was close to Lord Krishna, but due to my own fault, I have lost his favorable association and this invaluable treasure. Please tell me, how can I gain that back in my life? And Nimai Pandit started by weeping inconsolably and again lost consciousness. After some time, when he regained his consciousness again and he saw Gadhadar Pandit over there, he asked Gadhadar Pandit again, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? You please show him to me. So very soothingly Gadhadar Pandit told Nimai Pandit. He said that Krishna is there. He is there in your heart only. Why are you crying so piteously? And when Nimai Pandit heard this, he started tearing at his heart. He said, oh, I want to see Krishna now. And he almost started, scratching on the skin of his chest and all. And immediately Gadhadar Pandit held Nimai's hands, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's hands. And he said, no, just be pacified. Be calm. Krishna will come. You just calm down. So he did this whole exchange and he was able to pacify Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very nicely. And that time Mother Sachi was looking at all this. She saw what was happening, because whenever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go into all these ecstasies, nobody could go near him. Everybody was very scared to approach him. And Sachi Mata saw how expertly and with so much calmness Gadhadar Pandit handled Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was in one of those ecstasies. And Sachi Mata then ran out and he requested. She told Gadhadar Pandit, you have just saved my Nimai. She said that, please, I request you to stay with my Nimai for his entire life so that my son might be protected. Because I don't know what gets into him at some times and he starts behaving like this and he can harm himself. So you please always be by his side and you please always protect him. So Gadhadar Pandit was very, very affectionate with Mukunda. And Mukunda Datta, and Mukunda Datta would always take Gadhadar Pandit whenever any Vaishnavas would come to visit Navadvip Dham. So on one such occasion, a very great Vaishnava called Pundarik Vidyanidhi was visiting Navadvip Dham. And Mukunda Datta said, Gadhadar, come, I will take you to see a very eminent Vaishnava who has come to give us his blessings in this holy place of Navadvip. So Gadhadar Pandit, he was a very renounced, austere, very simple and innocent brahmachari. So he went with Mukunda Datta to visit Pundarik Vidyanidhi. And they went into the place where he was living, Pundarik Vidyanidhi was living. He saw that Pundarik Vidyanidhi was dressed in the finest of clothes. Very beautiful, opulent silk clothes. He also had very nicely, decorated hair, very nicely combed hair with very nice, light, fragrant oil, shiny black hair. He was sitting in a very comfortable cushion, like a sofa. And that was, new white, expensive bed sheets were kept. And there were so many ornate decorations, even just on the sofa itself. There were 2 large mirrors which were hanging in front of his sitting place. And Pundarik Vidyanidhi would continuously glance into those mirrors and he would admire himself when he was glancing in those mirrors. And he would adjust whatever decorations he had on his body. And he was also having, there was a plate of betel nut which was kept over there. There were beautiful brass vases and ornate silver vases which were next to him. And 2 servants were continuously fanning him with peacock feathers. So, and that time Mukunda to Gadhadar Pandit, they paid obeisances and they sat down in front of him. And Mukunda Dutt introduced Gadhadar Pandit to Pundarik Vidyanidhi, saying that he's a very nice devotee of Krishna, he's a very simple brahmachari, very austere, very detached, so like that. But when Gadhadar Pandit saw Pundarik Vidyanidhi in this form, there was a little bit of doubt and suspicion which came in his mind. And he felt that, what is this Vaishnava? He says he's an eminent Vaishnava, but I see him enjoying so nicely. He's sitting, in such a comfortable place and with so much of luxury surrounding him and so much opulence surrounding him. So because he was a simple, austere brahmachari, he could not digest it. And when Mukunda Dutt saw, he realized that, okay, there is this little doubt which has come in Gadhadar Pandit's mind. So he immediately recited a beautiful verse from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. The verse which glorifies the position of Lord Krishna, the merciful position of Lord Krishna, how he delivered even a witch like Putna, the famous Ahobakiyam Sthanakala Kutam verse. So he recited that verse, and as soon as he recited that verse, Gadhadar Pandit saw the same Pundarik Vidyanidhi who was sitting in so much opulence, admiring himself, eating pan, his lips were a bit red. He saw a big transformation happen. Suddenly, Pundarik Vidyanidhi went into ecstasy. And all the sattvika bhavs started manifesting on his body. His hair stood on end. Tears started profusely flowing from his eyes. He did not realize he lost external consciousness. He started pulling at his clothes. He started, rolling on the ground. All that beautiful arrangements which were there, everything shattered to the ground here and there. And he started horripilating and he started saying Krishna, Krishna, and then he lost unconsciousness. And then very slowly when he regained consciousness, he sat back, but he was not still in external consciousness, and his servants were also very afraid to go near him. So Gadhadar Pandit realized when he saw this that he has made a big mistake by judging Pundrik Vidyanidhi just based on his externals. He should not have, even in his mind, obviously he had not expressed anything, but even in his mind, he should not have judged this Vaishnava to be someone who's materialistic. He's such an elevated Vaishnava. That is what he realized when he saw those Ashvasastika bhav come on him. So then Gadhadar Pandit, he started repenting when he went home, and he thought that the only way I can overcome this particular offense that I have created or committed is I should accept Pundrik Vidyanidhi as my spiritual master. And he went and expressed this desire to Mukunda Datta, and he said, can you please take my wish back to Pundrik Vidyanidhi that I want to accept him as my spiritual master. And when Mukunda Datta conveyed this message to Pundrik Vidyanidhi, he was immensely happy. He said, oh, he's such a great devotee. It is my great fortune that I'll be able to serve him. I'm very happy to accept him as my disciple. And in that way, Gadhadar Pandit became the disciple of Pundrik Vidyanidhi. And that union is also correct because Gadhadar Pandit is none other than Radharani, and Pundrik Vidyanidhi's eternal position is that he is Vrishabhanu Maharaj. So, the son the daughter got united with the father in Navadvip Lila of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, Gadhadar Pandit could not bear separation. So, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas and went away to Jagannath Puri, Gadhadar Pandit also followed. Later in the year when all the devotees were going on, for the 4 months of the Chaturmas, devotees would go and stay with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri. They would go on a walking procession from Navadvip. So Gadhadar Pandit also went there and he just decided not to come back. He decided to make Jagannath Puri his place of residence because he could not bear separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was residing in a garden. So that garden was called as Tota in Orissa. So he would sit over there and he would daily recite Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. And he would recite the pastimes of Dhruv Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj hundreds of times, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come and relish those pastimes. And it is said that both of them used to shed profuse tears, that all the manuscripts got washed away because of their tears. But they would still continuously recite these pastimes hundreds and hundreds of times. And, Gadhadar Pandit, actually once they were sitting on the beach in Jagannath Puri, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to, bestow his mercy on Gadhadar Pandit. So he told Gadhadar Pandit that you just dig the ground where you're sitting and see what you find. There's a treasure for you over there. So when Gadhadar Pandit dug that ground on the beach, the beautiful deity of Gopinath came from there, manifested from there. And with a great, procession amidst with all the Vaishnavas, they established this deity of Gopinath in that garden where Gadhadar Pandit used to live, that Tota. And that's how the deity came to be known as Tota Gopinath. And it is described that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left this world, Gadhadar Pandit could not bear separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He started aging very quickly. So he was hardly 47 years old or something like that, but he started aging very quickly and became very old. His body became very old. And he was continuously worshipping Tota Gopinath deities all these years. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had given him 3 activities to do. He had told Gadhadar Pandit that be the authoritative teacher of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam because of the way Gadhadar Pandit could recite the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. He also told him that give Diksha on behalf of Mahaprabhu to the true seekers of the path of Vraja Bhakti. You have to give them Diksha. So he made him an initiating spiritual master as well. And the 3rd instruction he gave him was worship the deity of Gopinath along with his eternal consort Srimati Radharani. So all these 3 instructions Gadhadar Pandit was following throughout his life. But as soon as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left his body, he had no desire to live at all. So his body aged very quickly, and then it became very hard for him to garland Gopinath. because he could not stand on his like tippy toes and garland, because Gopinath was quite tall. So Gopinath, just to reciprocate with his devotee and devotee service, he actually sat down, so that Gadhadar Pandit would not have to strain himself to put a garland around him. So he sat down, and that way it became very easy for Gadhadar Pandit to start garlanding Gopinath. And even today, if we go and see the Gopinath deity in, the Tota Gopinath deity in Jagannath Puri, that is the only deity in the world which is sitting down. Krishna is sitting down. Otherwise, we always see Krishna standing up playing his flute. But this is the only deity, and that was just to reciprocate and show mercy and to accept the worship of Gadhadar Pandit. And it is described that Gadhadar Pandit, in fact, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would even visit Vrindavan, Gadhadar Pandit would always want to go with him, because he could not bear separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Gadhadar Pandit, when he came to Puri from Navadvip, he had taken Kshetra Sannyas. Kshetra Sannyas means I will not leave Puri and go till my death. But when he heard Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to Vrindavan, he said, I'll also come with you. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rebuked him and said that, no, you have to remember your vow. You have taken a vow of Kshetra Sannyas. If you leave Jagannath Puri and come with me, I will become an offender, because I would have made you break your vow of leaving the Kshetra where you have taken Kshetra Sannyas. And Gadhadar Pandit wailed and cried. He said, no, my lord, wherever you are, that is my Kshetra. So if I am going with you, it is none other than Jagannath Puri, and I am still not breaking my vow. And somehow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Vrindavan trip got cancelled because of some obstacle that came. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was telling all the Vaishnavas later. He said that because I, made Gadhadar Pandit cry, and I was not allowing him to travel with me to Vrindavan, and I offended him, and his heart was pained. Because of that, I was not able to go to Vrindavan. Krishna did not give me entrance into Vrindavan. That is how much, dear Gadhadar Pandit was to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart. Obviously, later on, he did go to Vrindavan, and he did not take Gadhadar Pandit with him. He did not want to become the cause of Gadhadar Pandit breaking his vow. So these were the intimate pastimes which used to happen. And we know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he left this world, he merged into the deity of Tota Gopinath. There is still that crack. So if we go during Mangla Arati, the pujaris at Tota Gopinath temple actually show us that crack where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu merged. And it is said that exactly 1 year later, because Gadhadar Pandit could not bear separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also left this world, and he also merged into his worshipable deity of Tota Gopinath. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written a beautiful verse on Gadhadar Pandit. He said, he has written, Amar Gaura Gadhadar Kali Kalam Bhava Gaura Gadhadar Pakshacharam Smu Gaura Gadhadar Charu Katham Bhaja Godruma Kanana Kunja Vidham. Remember the wonderful pastimes of Gaur and Gadhadar. Become a servant of Gaur and Gadhadar. Listen to the beautiful narrations concerning Gaur and Gadhadar, and worship Lord Gaura, the beautiful moon of the groves of Godruma. So these are the glories of Bhakti Gaur Gadhadar Pandit, with Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself has enunciated. So we'll stop the class here. It's time up. Today there's no breakfast, so we went a little overboard. Half-day fasting. But anybody had any questions or any comments?
How come Yamuna said that the symptom of the liberated person is miserable?
So I did not do much further research into that, but I think he was meaning that, because Gadhadar Pandit himself, he said, no, when you later on you will realize this. So Gadhadar Pandit himself was very renounced, and he was miserable in the pain of separation of Krishna. So that is what he said, like a symptom of a liberated person is, especially a liberated Vaishnava, is that they are always feeling separation from Krishna. So I'm thinking that is what he has meant, but I haven't done much research on this, Prabhuji. Any other questions? Or? Okay, we'll stop the class here. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki, Gadhadar Pandit ki, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande.